This is International Arrivals.
Welcome.
You have arrived at your destination.
I'm Emily Lutzker.
And I'm Anna Kamasia. Today, International Arrivals speaks with Harold Offeh, an artist working in a range of media, including performance, video, photography, learning, and social arts practice. Harold is based in England, where he's also a tutor at the Royal College of Art.
Welcome, Harold. It's really great to meet you. Thanks so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Anna. It's really great to be with you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure. As you know, the series of podcasts is focused on notions of home and belonging. I wondered if you could start with your current project at the Van Gogh House, or as you Brits say, the Van Gogh House.
Yeah, absolutely. The current project, which is on in London at the moment,
Right.
At Van Gogh House. I always hesitate because, I can hear the Dutch people as well. No, it's not. It's neither of those. But anyway, I'm just going to go with the British anglicised Van Gogh House, which is a kind of interesting space that's been going for a couple of years. It was set up by the Wong family. It was previously just a domestic house in South London, in an area of South London called Brixton, which has a very rich cultural history, rich history of immigration, particularly from the Caribbean in the post-war period. And it was a house in the 1870s that a young Vincent van Gogh lived just over for a year when he was about 21, and quite a good period of his life where he was, came to London to work as an art dealer, really, through family connections, and had his own room, had quite a lot of disposable income, but it was also this first formative experience in London, which in the 1870s was the biggest city in the world, most industrialized, technological, but also this is Dickens' London. So it's like all that other stuff that, street urchins and extreme poverty, and, he's experiencing all of that as a young man. So, but anyway, so the house in the last couple of years has been renovated, and it's currently an art space, a small gallery. Half the year it's open for artists to do international residencies. So artists from abroad are able to have opportunities to live in this house that Van Gogh lived in and make work. And every year they do one commission, and it's open to the public to do tours and visits. This year has been my commission, and I was approached last year to kind of respond to the kind of context of the house. And what I was really interested in was the idea that they wanted to also tell the other lives that have lived in that house. So whether it's in the 19th century, itinerant workers, seamstresses, it was also a small school. And then throughout the 20th century, pretty much this Smith family, Mrs. Smith, who was 100 when she eventually moved out, spent most of her life and most of the 20th century living in that house. So, and the house also tells their stories. So for me, that also, I think, really links into this richer context of this part of South London and Brixton, which, is very rich with narratives and histories and waves of people that have made, I think, valuable contributions to British culture.
Can I just ask a clarification question about the stories that are told at the Van Gogh House? Is it the stories that you were just saying, the seamstresses, the maids, are those stories somehow in your artwork they're illuminated, or in the museum themselves they have these stories already?
Yeah, in the museum itself,
okay.
Yes. So, so even when there aren't commissions, you can visit the house and you can tour the house. It's been redeveloped. There isn't Vincent's bed or any of those things from the 19th century, but it looks like a house, and they've commissioned artists. It's been beautifully restored, I have to say. So Livia Wong is the director, is an architect, so really, really sensitively restored. But yes, they've included and found bits that reference some of these other histories and other lives that you can see on a normal tour.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. That's so interesting too, because it's so much about labor as well, migrations of laborers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So for this, how did you decide to approach it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was a kind of sort of real challenge. I mean, often in my work, I'm responding to kind of like historical narratives, archives, museums, artifacts. But this was a very particular situation because it's obviously got a very strong narrative in the connection to Van Gogh, but so I did struggle for a while to really think about and find a purchase. But I think, yeah, for me, it was really just quite literally making a connection between thinking about a young Vincent in the 1870s and just the fact that, you know, he was a migrant, he was an economic migrant as well, somebody that came here to make money, you know. And when I began to think about it in that context, it became quite live because, I mean, maybe for just international audiences, you know, in the UK at the moment, there's a huge amount of rhetoric around immigration, refugees, asylum seekers.
I mean, not just in England, I think everywhere.
Yeah. But I think we're at a very acute moment in the UK in terms of, you know, we've had a Conservative right-wing government for 12 years. And it's sort of ratcheted up the rhetoric around asylum seekers and refugees because we've seen an increase of people seeking asylum by crossing the channel in dinghies, often very flimsy crafts, endangering their lives. Many people have lost their lives. And the government has decided to respond to this. You know, we have a we have a secretary of what's Homeland Security. I guess we call it Home Secretary, but I don't know what the American equivalent is. But who's decided to characterize this as an invasion and to use very inflammatory language. They've set up these detention centres, processing centres, which which are overcrowded at the moment. They're riddled with, you know, various diseases. I mean, people will recognise this from very different contexts, but I think, and also this government has also now decided to export, you know, asylum seekers to Rwanda. So they have made an official governmental kind of link with the Rwandan government so that asylum seekers will be basically put on a plane and then they'll be processed in Rwanda. So they've done a deal with the Rwandan government. And now that's on hold because the Supreme Court here, it's going through the Supreme Court in the UK about the legalities of doing this. But, you know, this same Home Secretary, you know, she has also stated in Parliament that it's her Christmas wish that that asylum seekers are sent to Rwanda, that these planes will fly by Christmas. So I just want to emphasize that's the context in which that, you know, immigration, migration, asylum. I mean, these are all quite specific legal categories anyway. We get them mixed up all too easily. But that's the kind of national discourse that's being shaped. I'm not saying everyone believes in that, but certainly the government believes in that. And there are constituencies of people. And so for me to think about someone like Vincent van Gogh, who's this kind of romantic artist, you know, people think about to think about him as somebody who's coming here to work for a period of time as a young person, for me, just began to kind of give it a charge. And particularly in that context of Brixton, which, as I said, is so associated with Afro-Caribbean immigration to the UK in the post-war period and all the experiences that went along with that. It just brought it to life.
And for sites of resistance and protest as well. Like Brixton is known for that as well. Just for
absolutely, yes, yeah.
And does the Van Gogh House have a connection to the community in that way, or was it just you were thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very new institution, so it's kind of maybe sort of nearly 2 years old, and obviously it opened during the pandemic as well. So, I mean, they have been sort of slowly establishing links with community groups and partnerships. But again, it's something that I'm really interested in is facilitating and often working with community groups, as educational groups. So it's something I kind of brought as an interest. I mean, it was a very open brief to respond to the context of the house. And, what I wanted to do was try and link Vincent to some of these other narratives and histories of, other migrants, other immigrants that come to that part of South London, to Brixton, and to sort of bring these narratives into kind of like dialogue and connection. And that led me to kind of really discovering a figure that I had already known about and is already quite well known about, but in relation to this project. So an amazing activist, Jamaican-born activist called Olive Morris. And the project in Van Gogh House is a kind of staged, fictionalized conversation between a sort of 20-year-old Vincent van Gogh and a 20-year-old Olive Morris, who was a feminist, activist, housing activist, squatter in the 1970s. And I just discovered from revisiting Olive Morris's archive, she very untimely died, in her late 20s from a rare form of cancer. But she'd spent quite a lot of her life really community organising, grassroots organising, advocating for civil rights, advocating against violence, brutality against the Black and Asian communities in that part of South London. So her archive is based at a local library that's very near to Van Gogh House. And I sort of discovered that they were both in their early 20s, but separated by 100 years. So 1870s and 1970s. And I just thought that's became an opportunity to really, already I was making that kind of conversation between this idea of two young people at very formative moments of their lives who've come from other places, but are based in this particular place, in Brixton, and have a very particular purchase on the world. And I think sort of just thinking about that experience of young people in their early 20s, that moment in your early 20s where it's that sort of formation of self, but there's often a kind of, you're often testing ideas, you're exploring things. I'm not romanticizing this period in any way, but I just think it's interesting to think through them as historical figures in that moment. Like, for example, Van Gogh is not an artist,
right?
Doesn't consider himself an artist, doesn't at that moment have real aspirations to be an artist, but you can see there's a particular burgeoning concern for the world. He's observing things in very particular and detailed ways. He's very concerned with what we call social justice now. And at the same point, someone like Olive Morris, who has a formative experience at 17, she has an encounter with the police, where she observes this situation where the police are arresting a Nigerian diplomat, so a very well-dressed Black man in an expensive Mercedes, and they question him about why he's in this car, and that leads to an altercation, and she intervenes in that altercation. So instead of just standing by, there's a scuffle happening and she goes towards it, and then is arrested herself, and then is thrown in a van and brutalized, and this leads her to join the Black Panther Party in Brixton, South London. So already they're both engaged. They're at different points. Van Gogh is from a kind of sort of Protestant middle class kind of family connections have sort of brought him to London. Olive Morris is from a big Jamaican family. Her parents came a few years before she was brought over to kind of work, part of that huge influx of immigration into the UK from the Caribbean and South Asian communities in particular, and then later on from different parts of Africa, who fueled the post-war, labour and did all the jobs in our National Health Service that everyone is so proud of, and in transport infrastructure. So for me, I wanted to bring these kind of narratives together through the proximity of these two characters being in conversation.
So, and if I were to go into the house now and see the exhibit or hear the exhibit as it might be, what would the experience be?
Yeah, so the experience is sort of twofold. Mainly the work is an audio work. So I worked with two amazing performers, and they improvised these conversations. So we recorded in the house in different rooms, including Vincent's bedroom, Olive Morris and Vincent van Gogh meeting for the first time, and everything that comes out of this conversation that they have. But as you enter the space, on each floor, you'll encounter an audio work, and the sound, the way we work with these kind of transducers, which are like speakers that are attached to bits of furniture. So they're kind of invisible. There are no headphones. You'll just hear the sound coming from particular parts of the room. So on the second floor, there's like a table, and the actual transducer is attached to the bottom of the table. So it's like the table is sort of speaking a bit. It has some like aspects of ghostliness maybe, but and then there are also kind of these chairs. So there isn't much visual in the house. I was really kind of conscious of that it's a historic space anyway, that most people coming to the house are often coming just to see the house that Vincent van Gogh lived in, which, has a charge of its own. So I was really interested in the idea that the sound allowed people to engage with their histories, but also really explore the house, because I love snooping around houses. So, but then I've created these stools, which are based on map pin heads. So again, I'm sort of trying to think of, like, I often have these anxieties around making objects, because I think, like, what, why?